The Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, managed to pump and dump his way to $200 million of clients' money. Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme pocketed $17 billion in a fraud lasting several decades. In comparison, Russia's biggest schemer, Sergey Mavrodi, might seem to be a small fish with his paltry few hundreds of millions of dollars. But his pyramid still stands to this very day, partly because Mavrodi never denied that it was a pyramid. In fact, he embraced it. This is the story of the remarkable pyramid scheme born out of the wild and turbulent end of the USSR. Pyramid schemes have been around for a long time, but in some places they hit different. In particular, states that have recently come out of authoritarian socialism seem to have it the worst. For example, in 1997, 8 years after the removal of the Marxist-Leninists, Albania suffered a civil war motivated largely by the overwhelming losses of the general population via pyramid schemes. While no war due to pyramid schemes ensued in the former Yugoslavia or Soviet Union, the problem was still very serious. So why did people in these places get wiped out so badly? A common thread here is the way these schemes were advertised. Under Marxist-Leninist regimes, television was run by state broadcasters. In general, they did not sell advertising to private parties, and financial products like government-issued bonds generally had a degree of safety to them since losses would be repaid. Part of growing up with advertising as we know it is having its credibility die a death of 1,000 cuts. Most of us have had to learn the hard way that food does not arrive as advertised, that clothing, electronics, cars, or financial products are often advertised in deceptive ways. The most egregious example of this would be lifestyle marketing, the idea of selling an idealized lifestyle, not just the product itself. Dos Equis drinkers become the most interesting men in the world. Nike wearers have the discipline to work out while the rest of the city sleeps. Dodge Ram drivers are the types to help their friends move in between do-it-yourself projects involving often comically large pieces of equipment. It was in an environment lacking this tolerance for advertising which Sergey Mavrodi and other scammers prospered in.
15 марта, во вторник, я сдала все свои акции по цене 7 тысяч рублей.
Ну и что?
И получила 21 миллион.
О,
Моя прибыль составила 12 миллионов 600 тысяч рублей.
неплохо.
Вот почему я покупаю акции АО МММ.
Она умеет считать деньги. АО МММ.
Горе не беда, пусть мечта уходит навсегда и в никуда. Не жалейте в этой жизни ни о чем и никогда. Горе не беда, все лишь суета и между пальцами вода. И не верьте в этой жизни никому и никогда.
Sergey Mavrodi was born in 1955 in Moscow to a Russian-Ukrainian mother and a Greek father. Early in his life, he was diagnosed with a congenital heart defect, and doctors apparently told his family that he would either die in childhood or live a normal life. While he did survive, a normal life was not what was in store for him. With an interest in mathematics and physics, he attended a technical institute in the field of applied maths, but fell behind and was kicked out of the program. He began a career as an informal businessman, selling bootleg audio and video recordings. So as to not attract unwanted attention by not reporting an actual income, he got a job as a night watchman. In the Soviet Union at the time, most enterprises were state-owned, and running your own was generally not allowed. Eventually, he was caught, but the police let him out after 10 days, and either by ceasing his illegal business activities or being more careful to hide them, he survived until Perestroika. Perestroika was an initiative of final Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev, which, among other things, loosened restrictions on private enterprises.
Это из-за него у нас в экономике бардак.
Да благодаря ему у нас новые возможности.
Это из-за него у нас Политическая нестабильность.
Да благодаря ему у нас свобода,
Полный хаос.
перспективы.
Политическая нестабильность.
Да благодаря ему у нас есть пифахат.
За Горбачева!
За Горбачева!
And so, in 1989, Sergey Mavrodi, along with his brother Vyacheslav, created a company called MMM. The name came from the last initial of the two brothers, as well as another man named Muravyov. The early slogan of MMM was «Из тени в свет перелетая», flying from shadow to light. This early iteration of MMM was a tangible business. They imported office equipment. Sergey Mavrodi seemed to find his calling. By 1991, MMM was a market leader with 33 separate branches and even started its own bank called MMM Bank. By this point, the Soviet Union had collapsed, and private enterprise was fully allowed, and with it came certain obligations. In 1992, MMM attracted the attention of the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs, which investigated them for tax fraud, raiding their headquarters and checking their records with several banks, freezing their assets, and as a result, the MMM Bank was failing. With allegations of tax fraud and the grim state of the fledgling bank, no other lender would lend them money, a very difficult position for any business. Others would have elected to cut their losses, perhaps closing or selling the business, but not Sergey Mavrodi. If nothing else, the man was resilient. It was at this point that MMM pivoted from their real import business to financial services. Their new business was to sell securities to Russian investors. The new post-Soviet government inherited over 45,000 state-owned enterprises to manage. Their goal was to privatize most of them, but they also wanted to avoid a direct sale due to the danger of creating oligarchs. Their half-baked idea was to distribute vouchers redeemable in future private company shares to all their citizens. Books of these voucher coupons were given to citizens. To call this scheme a disaster in Russia, but also all over the former Soviet republics, would be an understatement. My personal favorite word for it was katastroika, a mix of perestroika and catastrophe. Many citizens didn't really understand what these vouchers were. Many were ignorant of the mechanics of capitalism, and many others had a good old-fashioned desperation for quick cash. Many sold their vouchers cheaply, resulting in the centralization of these shares into the hands of a small group of people.
В опубликованном в стальной искре пришли получать чек приватизационный. На семью или на себя только? На себя. Скажите, вы уже подумали, как им распорядитесь?
Тойоту купим. Говорят, Тойоту купим.
Но это, будем надеяться, шутка только, да? Вот. Вы не собираетесь его вкладывать, скажем, в акции своего завода?
Конечно.
Уже знаете, как примерно складывается ситуация? Там собрания проходили в цехе?
Не было
собраний? А тот, кто участвовал от цеха на конференции, что-то объяснял?
Никто ничего не объяснял.
Никто не объяснял. Ну, будем надеяться, что прояснится ситуация как-то, и вы распорядиться сумеете им с толком, так сказать.
Не знаю, ничего не знаю.
Да? Во всяком случае, продавать не думаете?
Кто как даст. Больше дадут, конечно, продадим.
It was the creation of oligarchs, just with extra steps. MMM also decided to cash in on the fun. They formed a scheme called MMM Invest. People with vouchers or cash could buy in with high promised rewards. This might have been scammy, but the real scam hadn't even begun. Up to this point, our protagonist Sergey Mavrodi had sold office equipment, started a bank, and bought up privatization vouchers. In 1993, MMM rolled out their Акционное общество MMM, aka the MMM Joint Stock Company. Without getting too technical for our purposes, a joint stock company is simply a company that issues shares in exchange for money. A share is simply a certificate of ownership of a part of that company, which entitles the holder to sell it or receive dividends. Perhaps you see where this is going already. The shares of this joint stock company were legally supposed to be limited to 1 million units. But that didn't stop MMM from printing tens of millions of them, effectively selling worthless papers after the first million shares were issued. Today we might think of the premise of 1,000% returns to be insane. But remember, hyperinflation in post-Soviet states had done similar arithmetic on people's savings and purchasing power. According to the World Bank, the Russian ruble's inflation rate for that year, 1993, was 874%. For some people, buying something, anything of value, was also a way to safeguard against the rampant volatility with something that wasn't the volatile Russian ruble. The MMM company promised to invest that money to see it grow, and invest they did, but also transfer some of that money to offshore banks. He was selling stock for a business that was built on a lie and using new stock certificate sales to pay dividends of old shareholders. At first, things seemed to be going well, as they always do in these schemes. MMM stock certificates bought in early 1993 for 1,000 rubles saw their price go up to 100,000 or more. They were being sold everywhere and demand was high. The early shareholders were, of course, reaping massive benefits and acted as the best form of word-of-mouth advertising. Imagine someone going from owning pretty much nothing to buying a new car and a new place to live, and all in just a couple of months. MMM pulled massive PR stunts to promote themselves further, to position their junk stocks as an island of safety in the sea of chaos. PR stunts like buying out the entire Moscow metro for one day, letting everyone ride for free on their dime. And of course, a massively popular advertising campaign featuring an everyman, Lenya Golubkov.
Куда ни кинь, всюду клин, на 50 тысяч уже ничего и не купить. Мучился Леня Голубков. Эх, была, не была. Прошло 2 недели. Сколько там набежало? Волновался Леня. О, ё-моё!
Куплю жене сапоги.
Who originally set out to buy his wife some new boots and ended up going on fancy trips to the FIFA World Cup and to San Francisco.
Это Америка. Это чемпионат мира по футболу. Это сборная Бразилии. Это сборная России. Это болельщики сборной России. Это Леня Голубков. А это его брат Иван. Плачет? В чем дело, Иван?
Я всю жизнь работал, пластался, а получал кроки. Алейка Болту продал акции, купил 2 путевки. И вот я здесь, на матче России, Бразилии, сижу и болею.
Не плачь, Иван, не надо плакать. АО МММ.
The concept of the ads, as explained by their director Bachit Kilagbayev, was simple.
Леня Голубков — это не классический персонаж, с которым можно себя идентифицировать, да? Короче, если я смотрю по телевизору ролик и вижу Леню Голубкова, я не думаю, что он — это я. А я думаю, ничего себе, урод, похож на соседа. Очень похож на родственника какого-нибудь. Идиот, вот такой. Козлы, вас обманут. И люди начинали разговаривать с телевизорами. Вас обманут, дураки, вы что не понимаете, вас кинут. Через 2 недели те же самые импульсы напарывались на действительность. Хорошо, 2 недели назад я умный считал, что кинут. Но меня же не кинут. Я же умный. В отличие от всех других. Окей, я прикинул, посчитаю. То все, 5-10.
As for the face of Lenya, it was an unknown before the ad's actor, Vladimir Permakov.
Играют дети, увидят меня, я прохожу мимо. Кто-нибудь скажет: о, Леня Голубков пошел. Они бросают там свой футбол, эти машинки, бегут за мной, кричат: Леня, купил жене сапоги, купил экскаватор, купил дом в Париже.
Unlike his Lenya persona, Permakov was hardly rich. He took the job for publicity, which is worth its weight in gold for someone in his profession, and made very little money from the ads.
Ну, в общем, самое большое я получал за последние ролики $200-250 за съемочный день. Вот посчитайте, это если раз в месяц или в 1,5 месяца раз, то даже на этих денег на жизнь не хватало. Так что я никогда не был богатым, состоятельным, как думают многие. Ну, в нищете я жил, в нищете до сих пор. Пока что вот так перебиваюсь. До конца моих дней я для зрителей, да и для специалистов буду все равно Леней Голубковым.
In April of 1994, however, the first shock would hit the scheme. The Russian Central Bank revoked Bank's license to operate. As the news hit, panic began to settle in, and the stock certificates began dumping in price as people began to desperately sell to avoid being the final bag holders for these papers. In a remarkable feat, Sergey Mavrodi was able to calm the disgruntled shareholders, and things began to return to normal. Crisis averted?
Кто-то, наверное, представляет меня таким. Или в лучшем случае таким. Не человек, а компьютер. А кто-то вообще уверен, что меня нет. На самом деле я есть. Вот такой.
The calm wouldn't last, however, because in July 1994, only 4 months later, the Ponzi scheme would suffer a critical blow. Once again, the tax authorities came for finding one of its subsidiaries guilty of not paying its taxes. They had to pay a 50 million ruble fine, roughly equivalent to $25,000 today. However, chose to fight back. They refused to pay. By the time the tax authorities attempted to withdraw the fine from MMM's bank accounts, the money in the account associated with that subsidiary had magically disappeared. While only the account balance for that one subsidiary was at zero, the shareholders began to get that helpless feeling again, like the rug was being pulled out from under them. Crowds began forming around the Moscow head offices of The government, which at this early point in the capitalist experiment had no legal precedent to deal with Ponzi or pyramid schemes, had rushed to respond, but tried to make it very clear they wanted nothing to do with returning lost funds.
Узнать вообще, что какие-то сверхавантюрные, так сказать, обещания, по крайней мере, к ним надо относиться очень и очень осторожно. Тысячные, понимаешь, проценты. Нигде это в мире такого нет. Откуда могло появиться? Поэтому, конечно, это дело абсолютно только банковское. Правительство здесь ни при чем и никаких ни гарантий. И сейчас вмешиваться не будет. Не будет. Дело судебных органов.
1 month later, in August 1994, investigators showed up to search Sergey Mavrodi's Moscow apartment and the offices. The Mavrodi brothers, Sergey and Vyacheslav, were detained. Obviously, the effect was even more panic from the shareholders. But besides panic, they were also unhappy with the Mavrodi arrest because they believed that when they were out of jail, the leaders of could return them their money. Protests began to form, demanding Mavrodi's release, but alas, in jail he was to stay. Mavrodi seeded a rumor that the police had loaded 17 trucks with money they recovered from the office and promptly stole it. However, despite the area outside the office being filmed round the clock by national and international news, as well as the crowd themselves, not one of these mysterious trucks was caught on any of these cameras. It was at this time that Sergey Mavrodi decided on another bold move. While he sat in the slammer, he decided to run for office as the representative for the Mytishchi district in the federal parliament.
Чего я иду в Думу, я могу объяснить. Ну, мне кажется, что я смогу там принести достаточно большую пользу, просто потому что я человек, который на практике все это прошел, столкнулся с беспределом властей, со всеми этими силовыми методами, со всей этой реальностью, которая абсолютно отличается от того, что декларируется властями. Поэтому я знаю ситуацию изнутри и, вероятно, смогу при принятии каких-то законов как-то воздействовать на то, чтобы законы, которые у нас принимались, работали и действительно шли на пользу развития предпринимательства.
That specific seat had recently become vacant due to the untimely death of the previous parliament member, Andrei Aizerdzis, who was killed in retaliation for contracting the death of a local crime lord, Viktor Burlachko. Mavrodi didn't have a platform or a political vision. He merely said that if he was elected, he would return people's money. His attorneys plugged the courts with endless queries until eventually, out of either fatigue or perhaps the good legal standing of these queries, they succeeded in having him released from jail on his own recognizance. 3 weeks later, he won his parliament seat, and due to his newfound immunity from persecution as a result, effectively dodged the court case against him. His time in office was, however, brief, lasting about a year. The only time he ever actually showed up for his job at Parliament was when State Prosecutor Alexei Yulchenko petitioned the Parliament to drop his immunity from prosecution. In October 1995, Parliament decided to remove his immunity. The case against him sprang to life again, and along with tax evasion charges, he now had a new one added to the list: fraud. In 1996, Mavrodi attempted to run for president of the Russian Federation, but the Electoral Commission didn't allow him to run this time. I wonder if he intended to show up for that job had he managed to beat Boris Yeltsin. In any case, with his presidential ambitions forever shattered, Mavrodi disappeared, frustrating prosecutors once again. For a year, he managed to evade capture, living in the middle of Moscow in an apartment in the Frunzenskaya embankment area. For a second time, as he was being arrested, protests formed to voice support for Mavrodi, because he would return them their money.
Руки прочь от Мавроди! Руки прочь от Мавроди! Руки прочь от Мавроди!
So what happened to all that missing money anyway? It turns out that Mavrodi liked to collect butterflies and precious stones. Shell companies named after butterfly species and stones at one point had the funds from some of the sales of the MMM stocks. But the money was cleaned out of the accounts, and after that, the trail went cold once again. Sergey Mavrodi managed to escape prosecution not once, but twice. Once by getting parliamentary immunity, and once by running and hiding. But once he was finally captured at his apartment in Moscow, he was finally going to go to prison. He was accused of cheating 10,454 victims with the MMM pyramid. Though he still had some defenders, public opinion had turned against him. The Russian Public Opinion Research Center found that 3/4 of Russians polled considered him a crook who belonged in prison. By 2003, he was sentenced to 3 years of prison for not paying his taxes, but the courts overturned this sentence due to the statute of limitations. He was nevertheless held in detention since the prosecutor's office wasn't done with him. In a separate trial that concluded in 2007, he was found guilty of fraud on a large scale and theft of property. The court found that he stole $110 million from his victims, but a series of alternative estimates existed as well, with some claiming 70 to 80 million, while others claiming it was no less than $1 billion. Due to the length of the court proceedings, he was given credit for time served, and he was released months after the verdict. Mavrodi didn't just sit around while he was confined. He used the time to record long videos where he discussed various topics. Mavrodi also spent time reflecting and learning from his mistakes. In 1998, he briefly operated an online stock exchange with his stepsister Oksana Pavluchenko called Stock Generation Limited, which was going just fine until it turned out that all the companies on the exchange were fake. The US Securities and Exchange Commission had managed to put a stop to that and took back most of the money it made. His scheme had taken 276,000 US citizens to the cleaners. MMM and Stock Generation Limited had been centralized organizations. They had clear central leadership, offices, employees, and bank accounts. They had to pay taxes and abide by specific business laws. If he was to roll out a new organization, it would have to be different, and the new, modern MMM 2.0 had been born in his head. For this scheme, he would involve the concept of mutual aid. Mutual aid is an anarchist and libertarian socialist idea where members of a society or group share their resources, time, and expertise without expectation of payment. For example, in revolutionary Catalonia, where a farmer would share their produce with the people in their town, but also receive the care of a doctor, education from a teacher for their children, and so on. But Mavrodi wasn't interested in building a left libertarian society. He would use the name mutual aid and build a pyramid out of it, the exact opposite of that concept. You see, in order to attract certain types of people, the kind of people willing to invest their money in a scheme made by a convicted fraudster, he had to provide some kind of upside or profit. But how does one achieve this within the framework of an idea like mutual aid? The way it worked is a bit complicated, but bear with me here. Imagine you're Alex, our generic cutout protagonist. He wants to join MMM. So what now? Well, step 1, he would have to give help. This is the MMM way of joining. They give you a bank account number, or in the later years, a crypto wallet address, and Alex would send an amount to another anonymous member. Let's say Alex sent $50. Now Alex would be credited for that $50 with 50 Mavros. The token of the MMM 2.0 economy would have absurd profit in the form of compounding interest. You could double those 50 Mavros in a few months by doing nothing. And when you wanted to cash out, you would request help. The maximum amount you can request was the amount of Mavros you had. So let's say Alex had patiently sat on his 50 Mavros with a monthly 20% interest. In 1 month's time, 50 grows to 60. In 2 months' time, 60 grows to 72. In 3 months' time, 72 becomes 86. And in 4 months' time, Alex officially doubles his money and has 104 Mavros, which means that while Alex offered help at $50, he can now cash out at $104. Pretty sweet deal, don't you think? The joys of compounding interest. Usually it works against you while you pay off loans or credit cards, but here, for once in Alex's life, compounding interest has magically doubled his money in 4 months.
Куплю жене сапоги.
Now, if it wasn't already clear, such a scheme has a big structural flaw. Pretty soon, the amount of Mavros in the system, that is, the debt, exceeds the amount it can reasonably pay out. In order to pay Alex his hard-earned extra $54, another person has to give help. And with the nature of the high interest rate, there will have to be a lot of givers even 4 months down the line from the beginning of this entire project. And of course, the whole system was set up in a decentralized way. This way, there was no central bank account, no office, and no employees. When Alex joined, he did not contact Mavrodi directly to do so. He contacted a desyatnik, a boss. This boss operated his own small cell of members. This boss reports to a sotnik, a centurion. That sotnik reports to a tysichnik, perhaps roughly translatable as a legate. Theoretically, if a payout was too big for a boss's individual cell to handle, his higher up would shuffle the money around in his subordinate cells to find people to pay. Now, here we hit another issue of this scheme. When you reach the level of Mavrodi, no one keeps an account of how much Mavros he has. He could send any request for help down to any of the cells below him, and they would have to pay him out. And since every Mavro has a corresponding cash value, there is no limit to how much money he can milk out of the lower levels of the pyramid. And if you're some underpaid and already overworked prosecutor or police detective, good luck tracking that money, which members of the MMM 2.0 insist are gifts coming to and from a variety of member accounts.
Система работы МММ похожа на большую кассу взаимной помощи.
Короче, касса – это как огромный бассейн.
Вот, смотри, бассейн.
Вот.
Так.
А сюда по трубочкам вливаются вклады в этот бассейн, водичка. И он все время полный.
Ну вот и получается, у кого есть свободные деньги, они вливают в бассейн, да? А кому сейчас нужно, те забирают.
Конечно.
Ну а я вам что говорит? Ну то же самое.
Mavrodi's new MMM 2.0 became extremely difficult to track down or do anything about. And not being tied to national borders, he launched an online version called MMM China. Things seemed to be going well for Sergey. He didn't live the most lavish of lifestyles. He resided quietly in the apartment he inherited from his parents. He didn't drive a Lambo, and he didn't wear fancy jewelry, didn't own a yacht, and there was no supermodel by his side. In 2018, in the Sevyolovskoye area of Moscow, a passerby found a man collapsed on a bus stop and called an ambulance. The unwell man was complaining of weakness and pain in his heart. After being taken to hospital, the man was identified as none other than the godfather of Russian pyramid schemes, Sergey Mavrodi. The doctors could do nothing to save him, and he passed away. He was 62. His body lay in the morgue for 5 days, unclaimed. Mavrodi had no friends. His parents were dead. His brother Vyacheslav and he were not on speaking terms after their original business venture in the 90s. His son Maxim had not spoken to him in many years, and his ex-wife had moved on long ago when he went to prison. But what he built, MMM 2.0, would survive him. In fact, it exists to this very day. The grave could not hold back Sergey Mavrodi's important work. Before his death, MMM 2.0 cells were set up in various countries around the world. Brazil, South Africa, Uganda, Kenya, Thailand, and many others. That is, in addition to still operating in Russia and other post-Soviet states. The government of the People's Republic of China released an advisory against people participating in MMM, but as far as I can tell, the network there still exists. In South Africa, local MMM proselytes were trying to grow a whole community around their network. In Russia itself, one Danil Yusupov emerged to consolidate the Russian portion of the network. Yusupov, from the city of Kazan, operates a YouTube channel with over 250,000 subscribers and several Telegram channels, all focusing on MMM. Yusupov likes to position himself as a hand-picked successor to Mavrodi. Yusupov has been around MMM since at least 2011.
Тогда была какая-то валюта, то есть билеты МММ, которая предположительно росла в цене. И сейчас есть мавры, так называемые. Отличие лишь техническое, но оно принципиальное. То есть тогда было юридическое лицо, то есть такая болевая точка. Была концентрация денег, наличности причем. Сейчас этого ничего нет. Нет ни юрлица, ничего. Есть просто взаимодействие физлиц. То есть де юр это взаимодействие физлиц без всяких гарантий, обязательств, обещаний. Это невозможно запретить нигде, ни в одной стране мира.
Several times, Yusupov has been caught by interviewers admitting he lives off of MMM money and puts no money into the system himself.
Вы живете за счет МММ.
Ну, не существует никакой МММ. Есть люди, которые друг другу переводят деньги. Вы вообще ничего не поняли. И ничего не хотите понимать.
Скажите, и я думаю, что это финальный вопрос. Получаете ли вы сами помощь от кассы взаимопомощи МММ?
От кассы взаимопомощи, а от участников?
От участников.
Принципиальный момент, что вот когда я возродил систему, я сразу сказал, что вот мне на проживание, на, как я это называю, поддержание штанов, я буду запрашивать помощь, и я ее запрашиваю. То есть участники мне переводят деньги. Я это не скрываю, это афишируется мной принципиально.
А сами вы являетесь человеком, которому пишут, сейчас надо скинуться на взаимопомощь такой-то суммой, и вы такой отправил.
Вы забавные вопросы задаете. Я являюсь тем человеком, благодаря которому это все работает. И люди охотно мне оказывают помощь. Не то чтобы
Ответ
вот...
да или нет, вы сами оказываете помощь?
Деньгами в смысле? Нет. Деньгами нет. Зачем?
Действительно.
To date, no details have ever been shared by Yusupov to explain precisely how much money he takes out of the MMM pyramid every month. Members are encouraged to advertise MMM to their social networks and earn kickbacks in Mavro tokens for the trouble.
Olá, sou Stephanie Maiara, sou do Brasil. Conhecer meme.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Надежда, я являюсь участницей кассы взаимопомощи Сергея Мавроди.
Всем привет, меня зовут Оксана, я активный участник, рядовой участник программы «Возрожденный МММ 2.0».
Всем привет, меня зовут Филипп, я участник МММ 2.0.
Hello there, I'm Jerry Amuronge from Uganda. I provided help of 10 USDT on 14th of November.
Olá a todos, sou o Anderson Soares, sou do Brasil.
Всем привет, меня зовут Арманд, я являюсь участником кассы взаимопомощи МММ 2.0.
Всем привет, поздравляю всех с новым 2024 годом. Меня зовут Юлия, я рядовой участник кассы взаимопомощи МММ 2.0. Начала свое участие в октябре 2023 года. За все время оказала помощь 2 раза, первый раз на 100 тысяч.
For research purposes, I decided it was time to try it out myself. And so, in February of 2024, I filled out a web form to sign up. I was almost immediately paired with a Desyatnik boss who told me that my association with MMM would become official when I offered help for a minimum of $100. I was given a Tether cryptocurrency address to send the money to. Allegedly, this belonged to another MMM user. When the money was successfully received, a Google Sheet managed by my Desyatnik boss was shared with me to show me my portfolio. My $100 was exchanged for 19 Mavro tokens, which were supposed to appreciate in value by 50% every month. My plan was to wait for a couple months, let it grow a bit, and then ask for the grown amount to see what would happen. After about 6 months, in August of 2024, I asked my Desyatnik boss to receive help. In other words, I asked to withdraw money from the system. As these Mavro tokens were sitting there for 6 months between February and August, their value had increased to $1,144. Unfortunately, my Desyatnik contact told me in response that this was no longer possible.
И вот ты пишешь, у меня там лежит $1000. Где лежит, Иван? Вот ты мне объясни, пожалуйста. Ты же, вот смотри, МММ – это люди. Ты оказывал безвозмездно помощь, переводя средства другому участнику. Напрямую. Правильно? Правильно. Так где они у тебя? Где у тебя лежит? Разве что-то у тебя лежит?
It seems that in March of 2024, Yusupov had made a series of decisions related to a major crisis that was occurring in the MMM network. The gist of it boiled down to the fact that not enough people were in the network offering money, and so from now on, the only way you can receive help from the system was to invite new members first. If you don't invite new members, well, no money for you. For each member you invite, you get a certain percentage added onto your Mavro token interest rate. They of course don't tell you this up front. You need to read walls of text or track down individual posts made in Telegram groups months or years ago to get the whole picture. To hear Yusupov tell it in a series of rants he posted on Telegram, the problem were all these greedy new users who have no respect for MMM and just want free money. Where was their sense of community, of altruism, of helping their fellow man? These amoral users came into the network with a sense of entitlement and put pressure on the whole thing. This leads us to the cornerstone of the MMM idea. It all comes down to the dance between people helping each other and the desire to make massive profits off of them. Either the system is built for mutual aid where people truly help each other, or it's built for making money fast, where people rip massive interest rates out of each other. And Yusupov and all the other MMM pyramid leaders around the world did indeed inherit this from Mavrodi. They walk the line and present both as the truth, like some kind of pseudo-postmodernist soup. When someone attacks one side, for example accusing them of ripping off their users, they hide behind the mutual aid side of it. It's just people helping people, guys. And when someone attacks them for not having any incentive for anyone to send help, they hide behind the fact that there are interest rates. You can make money doing it, guys. When someone asks Yusupov to clearly explain the system by drawing it on a whiteboard, like what happened on the TV show Po obye strany obmana, both sides of deception, he draws a completely unrelated scheme showing how someone would borrow money to buy milk.
Это модель, то есть это просто модель для понимания. Смотрите, вот это простая модель. По 100 рублей есть у каждого условно. Это те деньги некритичные, которые люди готовы скинуть.
Да, мы поняли, некритичные.
300 рублей. Значит, смотрите. Допустим, вот этот человек, вот они скинулись по 100 рублей, забирает 150 рублей. Когда человек вообще забирает деньги из банка? С какой целью?
Потребность.
Потратить, купить. Потратить. Совершенно верно. Ну, давайте я с вами буду. Вот вы потерпевший. Потратить. То есть вот он забрал 150 рублей.
Да.
А это вся экономика, 3 человека, это модель. Соответственно, потратить у кого? То есть он у этого или у этого человека должен что-то купить. Ну, условно, там, молоко. Он ему отдает 150 рублей. Этот ему отдает молоко. Этот человек, ему деньги не нужны, он продал молоко. Есть касса взаимопомощи, которая платит предположительно 50% в месяц. Он эти 150 рублей, естественно, возвращает.
Положительно платит. Обожаю. Да.
Представим, что вот эти 3 человека, это... Давайте такое уточнение позволю.
Да.
Вот все из местных экспертов расценивают пирамиду как инструмент, вот якобы организатор собирает деньги. Правильно я понимаю? Вот все, кто
Неправильно, мы знаем, что они у вас нет общего счета, и это не освобождает вас от того, что это пирамида.
And so the idea of the pyramid, which is by now tainted by its association with financial fraud, is something they embrace. We make the pyramid work for all of us, MMM says. Finally, they underpin their arguments by criticizing the world financial system. Mavrodi did this as well. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot to criticize in our financial system, but they use it to cover for themselves. You say our pyramid is a scam, but don't you see how the whole banking system is a scam too? It's about as big of whataboutism as you can get. Just like the original MMM's early token holders, many people are indeed made rich via MMM's pyramid, but by sucking that money out of the bottom of the pyramid. It seems quite ironic then that MMM criticizes the global banking system, since in essence it takes the worst parts of that system, the inequality it espouses and the heartless way it sends money upwards from the many to the few, and simply doubles down on it. I am never going to get my $100 back. I was prepared to lose it. After researching the crypto wallet I sent that money to, I found that it received several other payments in similar sums, but never paid anyone else out. Just like with all pyramid schemes, it is possible to make money doing it, but of course you have to get in early and recruit a number of other people into the network before you will see any profit. The average person will lose money because quite simply that's how the system is designed. MMM has no product to sell, no business model of its own, and the profit of some of its members needs to come from somewhere else. The requesting of help from these junior members. That's the basic, unfiltered truth. Behind all of Mavrodi's and Yusupov's long-winded rants and explanations, the basic fundamental mechanic is that one user must transfer money to another. With no other way of actually creating the money to pay for the exponential growth of interest rates of Mavro tokens, it must come from others in the network. In a nutshell, it's a scam. It robs Peter to pay Paul. It's pretty easy to sit and judge people scammed by such things. I'm smarter than that. And if that's you, well, remember, there's a scam for everyone out there. There are countless scams promising wealth, prosperity, health, education, community, and everything in between. Take your pick. The original MMM scammed desperate people who came out of a societal collapse, and the new generation of MMM's participants are no different than those who buy into scams perpetrated by people covered by other YouTube channels such as CoffeeZilla. Thank you for watching. I'm sorry about the long wait. From now on, I am doubling down on this channel and will put more time into it, allowing me to make more content like this. I'm also about to put out a new additional format of video coming soon. If you haven't already, subscribe, leave a like or a comment on my video. It really means a lot to me. And thank you so much to everyone who left me so many interesting comments. Believe me, I read every one of them and try to respond whenever I can. До свидания.